Are you ready for the Life, Love, and Money Show with Summer and Jen? Get ready, get your questions ready about life, love, and money. This is a live show that you're not going to want to miss. Join us. Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Life, Love, and Money Show with Summer and Jen. We're so excited to be here with you today. Woo-hoo-hoo! This is a weekly show with Jen and I. We are so excited to be here with you. We're two professional coaches, Jen and I, and we're here to answer your life, love, and money questions. At this time, I want to take the opportunity to introduce my co-host, who is Jen. And Jen is a former financial advisor, now a certified money coach, speaker, and has published not one, not two, not three, but 6 books. And she has worked with organizations such as the Walt Disney Company, Warner Brothers, Target, Goodwill, and the U.S. Air Force. She loves working with women and helps master their money mindset and matters to empower them to build the ultimate life without worrying about money. Wow, that is awesome, Jen. What a mission.
Thank you, Dr. Summer. And I have the wonderful privilege of introducing my amazing co-host. And Dr. Summer is the proud owner of the production and coaching company Core Women LLC. She is also a doctor of psychology with a depth of experience working in the for-profit and nonprofit sector in human services and the mental health field. She is also a professional coach and also an author, and you got to check her book out. It has an amazing title. But so amazing to have you here with me, and we're just excited that we're ready to do this.
We are so excited. So 2 weeks ago, we started the show. We started the platform on Instagram. And now we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're hoping to go live on LinkedIn here pretty soon as well. And as I said, on Instagram, where we do a live at the Core Women page. So 2 weeks ago, we started off with some questions regarding, and we had questions submitted to us. So those questions were in regards to basic checking and savings account information and going through that. And what happened was that developed into another question. And that question was, what are the differences between a traditional bank and a credit union? And I'm going to pass this one over to Jen because I think she'll do a great job in answering this question.
Oh yeah. How many of you out there, type yes in the chat, if you grew up and you realize like, yeah, you know what, I don't even know what a credit union is. And I remember hearing, oh, you should join a credit union. That's the advice you would always hear. So I totally understand when you don't, you're like, what is the difference, right? And so we're going to talk about this great question. So when it comes to the differences between your traditional bank and a credit union, there's going to be 3 major components. So the first one is ownership. And what I mean by ownership is how is it owned? So when we talk about the bank has shareholders. Let's face it, they're in it for profits. They're a business, so they have to answer to the shareholders, okay? Now, on the opposite end, we have a credit union. So the credit union is actually a nonprofit. I don't know how many of you knew that, but a credit union is a nonprofit entity. And so they answer to their members. So that's why you hear, oh, you should become a member of XYZ credit union. And, you know, I know Dr. Summer's going to share some of her experience with the credit union she's been a part of with her husband. And
Right.
So, right. And there's some member benefits there. And so you hear different types of credit unions, such as the teachers one, the firefighters one. It's got this community feel. It's sometimes one that's in the local neighborhood, that type of thing. And so this is why you kind of have that community feeling. The customer service is just really, really great. Is because they're a nonprofit. Not to say that the bank it can't give you good service, but let's face it, I've heard all your complaints about what bank you can't stand and hate, and then that conversation is like I hear it all the time. And so a credit union, because they are a nonprofit, they do things and they have a board of directors. So that's the first one, how they're owned. The second one is their objective. So if you're a business, like the bank, their objective is to maximize profits. So, both entities, the bank and the credit union, they want to help serve their customers. But at the end of the day, the bank's job is to answer to the shareholders. So they are all in it for profit. So the credit union, though, what happens is after their expenses are taken care of, anything that's left over, they want to pass it on to their members. And so they pass this in the form of lower fees, lower interest rates, or sometimes no fees. And so that's another huge difference between a bank and a credit union. And then the last one is operations. With the banks, you typically will have access to tons and tons of ATMs, tons and tons of locations. And, if you remember what I said in the beginning, sometimes it's going to be locally based. So the downside of the credit union is that if it's just locally based, you might not have as much access to ATM machines or whatnot, but don't just stop there, because they actually many times have a network. So, you might be able to go a different credit union and, access your funds that way. So the point of making the differences come to light is that you understand how are they structured? And then you have to ask yourself, what's important to you? What are your needs? And what entity is going to help give you what you're looking for? And let's face it, when we entered COVID and when we were going through a lot of the financial mess in the beginning of this whole quarantine, remember when everybody was trying to apply for loans and trying to get the PPP and all those different things? And
Right.
so one of the things that people had to make sure of was having all their financials squared away. Everything was, on the up and up. And that was not the time to be digging into the shoebox, trying to get the bookkeeping done, trying to, dig through receipts, all those things. And so this is why it's so important to have your financials, straightened out. But here's the advice that pertains to this particular question. The people that I saw that were talking about who got approved, when I would go into Facebook groups or conversations and webinars and whatnot, because, we all live in this virtual world now, the people that were saying that they got their loan approved like this were the people that had existing relationships with their banker. So it doesn't matter whether you want to bank at a big traditional bank. It doesn't matter if you want to bank at a, local credit union. The point that you need to understand, especially as a business owner, somebody that's looking to get loans or whatever, you need to have an established relationship, because once they know you, they got all your accounts, they see the history, you're good for it. Your application just gets processed a lot faster. So
Right.
that's the thing I think you should take away from this, is that, are you building a relationship with your banker, and is the entity that you're using for your accounts the one that you need to help best meet your needs?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Great strategy. Great tips. Love what you're saying, Jen. If you're on here now and this is your first time watching the Life, Love, and Money show with Summer and Jen, we are professional coaches here to answer your questions regarding life, love, and money. And Jen just answered a question regarding the difference between a traditional bank and a credit union. I have some comments about that, though, because I think it's really important to understand that one is a nonprofit, one isn't. One is like a public entity. So it is there to make money. It is there to, or a private entity. So it's there to make money. So here's the thing about a credit union. I am a member of two because my husband was in the military. We're able to be members of Navy Fed as well as USAA. And you know what the beauty of those credit unions are? It's that when we're anywhere in the world and we need to use an ATM or we need to take a picture and deposit a check, we can do that with our phone. We can do that with our iPad. We can do that with whatever mechanism we have, basically, to deposit that check. Also, we can use an ATM anywhere in the world. And guess what? We get those fees back. So when you're looking into a credit union versus a bank, just look at the perks. Look at what works for you. And for us, a credit union really works for us because we can get great rates on our loans, our car loans, home loans, those kinds of things. We can get great rates on different types of insurance, like homeowners insurance. So again, please feel free to submit your questions, because we're here. This is like 30 minutes worth of free coaching. Who doesn't want some free coaching, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So if you're watching, we have another question, and that question has to do with life, love, and money. This is amazing.
Everything.
This is an amazing question. Okay, ready? This is the second question. This question is, my boyfriend is pressuring me to move in with him, but he's terrible with money, and I worry that he will leave me to pay the rent by myself. How important is this kind of stuff to a relationship? Wow, it is important. So my answer, I'm going to go through my answer and some tips that I have. But I forgot to touch on one thing, which was really important regarding the previous question. And I don't want to forget this. Jen made a really good point. That was to be proactive and plan. Plan ahead. Don't plan, I need a loan and we need it today. Plan ahead about the loan. Don't be reactive, be proactive. And I touch on that a lot. You'll hear me say those two words quite often because you always want to be more proactive than you are reactive in your response, right? So getting back to the question about the boyfriend, moving in, the rent, all this good stuff. So my answer is, this is a great question because this stuff is important. I love that you're planning ahead and asking the question that will have an impact on your life, love, and money matters. This covers all of those matters. This is exactly the type of show that talks about these types of questions and covers these facets of life. So my tips, have a talk with your boyfriend or your significant other and ask what responsibility that person wants to take when it comes to paying rent, possibly renter's insurance, groceries, the cost of laundry, food supplies. Make a list of all your monetary responsibilities together. Then let him know what you're willing to do. Again, this is opening the conversation, having open dialogue about this. It's really, really very important. Know this. The way you strategize about living with someone does not have to look like or be modeled after what you saw your parents do or what you're seeing your friends do, or potentially what another couple is doing. Base it off your own beliefs and values and also what works for the two of you. And that's really critical. Having that open dialogue, understanding what it means to the two of you to move in together and what your finances are going to look like and what your boundaries are for that, because this may be the first time you're moving out of the home. It may be your first time moving in with somebody. It may be the first time in college. It may be the first time going into the military. It might be the first time you're balancing your own checkbooks. So make sure you have a good understanding. Then create a plan of action prior to moving in, like saving for first and last month's rent. Also, potentially saving 2 months of rent. This will also create a sense of understanding and whether or not your significant other will follow through on the plan before you actually move in together. And that is so important, right? Because if you don't pay that, then it's like, or if you don't put money in a shared account or blah, 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 it's not going to work. That's going to be really difficult. So last thing I have to say, and I'm going to turn this over to Jen after that, is if he's not ready or that significant other is not ready to talk about moving in together and the financial responsibilities, then maybe you're not ready to move in together. Maybe that's not the time to move in together because this really, really is important at this point to have some open dialogue. So Jen, I'm gonna let you take this over because I think it's really important from a financial aspect for you to touch on some of these things as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I completely resonate and agree with everything you said, Summer. I think it's important for people to have this open dialogue and discussion because that's going to be a red flag. If your partner can't even talk about this and you haven't even moved in, you haven't even made these big steps yet, it's like, oh my goodness, we can't even talk about it. Imagine trying to bring up a conversation about paying rent, mortgage, utilities, and other financial responsibilities that you're trying to share because now you're trying to play house. And it's going to be such a strain. It's going to be emotional strain. It's going to be financial strain. And if you're the one that's responsible, and you're trying to figure out if the other partner is not responsible, guess who it's going to fall upon? Because clearly you're the one that's demonstrating that you really want to be responsible with your money, and that you're trying to do this with somebody who doesn't have a handle on it. So you really need to ask yourself if that person is willing to talk about it, is willing to change their habits, is willing to get on the same page, be on board with you to make this work and happen. Otherwise, like Dr. Summer said, maybe you're not ready, but you have to pay attention to that. One of the things that, we were talking about at a different time was that, okay, well, should we, how do we navigate through this? Because here's the thing, if you don't talk about the division of responsibilities, the person that's going to, the person that's shouldering it is going to just crack. And the other thing too is, like, if you have to also talk about, is it going to be a 50-50 thing? A lot of times people think like, oh, we'll just, what does that really mean? You can't just say, oh, we're just going to share the responsibilities, because what if you make 6 figures? Let's say you make 100,000 and then your partner makes 45,000. Nothing wrong with that. But then if you say 50-50, I mean, you're asking somebody to, slash that in half, what they bring in, and then you to you, that might be chump change. So you have to also be really mindful of how you're going to divide the responsibilities and the expenses, because it's going, if you don't plan, like Dr. Summer is stressing, if you do not plan, it's going to be very detrimental and stressful, and you just don't want to put yourself in that situation.
Right. I think you've made some really, really valid points, because I think it really comes down to, Jen, a lot of shared and open communication. If you don't have that dialogue or that communication, that's going to be really challenging. Not just in the instance of, are we going to move in together and pay rent and pay all these other things that come along with living with someone, but down the road, having children, potentially changing jobs, being on the same page in regards to raising a child. So there's all kinds of things that you really need to be aware of and open that dialogue to when you're talking about a relationship. So this question is beautiful because, and again, the question is, my boyfriend is pressuring me to move in with him, but he's terrible with money, and I worry that he will leave me to pay the rent by myself. How important is this kind of stuff to a relationship? Very important, because it's not just paying the rent. It's about communication. It's about understanding. It's about empathy. It's about the division of finances. It is about monetary equity, so we could get into a long discussion about the equity of employment and jobs for women versus men and so forth and so on. But we're not going to go there. We're going to divert that question right now, because we want to really, really, really tune into the specific question, which has to do with how to prepare if you're going to move in with somebody emotionally, financially, and otherwise. So I love what you had to say in regards to your tips and strategies, Jen, because I think that it's absolutely important to be proactive versus reactive. Start planning now. Any other tips that you might have for this couple?
Not yet. I think I'm going to save it for maybe your next question.
Okay. Okay, so the next question, let's see. Oh, you know what? Yes. Here's the next question. My next question is, should this couple open a joint checking and savings account to start working on their plan of moving in together? This is such a good question. So let me hear what you have to say about this, Jen.
Okay, so to me, I get this question a lot, and there is no right or wrong answer, because you're going to get some people who are on one side of the spectrum that say like, oh yeah, you have to have a joint account, because if you have separate, you're just lying to each other. I've seen people just make comments like that. I'm like, okay, they're not liars. Maybe some, but not all. You can't just blanket statement. And then there's some people that like, no, that's my money, that's his money, no way, separate. But you don't know the whole story. So my short answer is, you do what works for both of you, as long as you have open communication, like we've been saying, And as long as the financial responsibilities are being taken care of, rent, mortgage, utilities, the kids' needs, food, all those things, if those things are getting taken care of, I don't care if you have separate accounts. But I will say, one thing that I think helps a lot of couples, or if you're in this shared situation, is we were calling this the responsible fund. If you have an account, it could be a checking account. If you have one account that you funnel your agreed amounts to contribute to, and this is the account that the bills, expenses, everything gets paid out of, there should be no reason why those things are not getting taken care of. I've heard couples say like, well, I thought you were taking care of the light bill. Like, well, I thought you were going to pay this. When I start to hear comments like that, then I know you aren't talking to one another. There's no communication. I mean, not even fighting. I mean, it's just the basic household managing of funds. You aren't having that conversation. I mean, my goodness, you should not be wondering if something's getting paid. First off, if it's all coming into one account and you figure out those expenses and then you put it on auto bill pay and you make sure that every time you guys get paid and you agree on the amount that's supposed to go into this fund, this checking account, and you have everything on autopilot, there is absolutely no reason. If you plan, there's no reason why your responsibilities aren't getting taken care of. And then if you want to have your separate accounts so that, hey, as long as you guys come together and come to an agreement how much each of you need to contribute to this fund, this account, whatever you want to call it, where things are getting paid out, she can go buy what she wants. He can go buy what he wants, and you don't question it because the responsibilities are getting taken care of. So that answer kind of says like you can have both.
Yeah, it's like, eating your cake, having your cake and eating it too, right? So I think that it's really important to touch back on the responsible account. I think that it's really, for me, it would be really important to have one account called that responsible account. I love the name of that. Let's call it the responsible account. So the responsible account allows for you both to put money into that account to pay those bills. So what that means is essentially that if you have that responsible account, then it becomes really clean. You don't have to have the conversation about money every single month. Well, you don't have to ask your partner, all right, have you put your money in there yet? Have you done A, B, and C? Because maybe then when you have that responsible account, you can set up direct deposit in relation to every month when you get paid or every 2 weeks when you get paid, money goes directly into that responsible account to pay those bills. So it really makes things very clean. Now, on the other hand, in regards to a savings account, if you have certain objectives, say for instance, you want to save for a vacation, or if you want to save for a boat, or if you want to save for something special, right? That's where the savings account can potentially come into play and be really helpful, in that your objective is that you are going to pay or put money into that account, that savings account, so much every month. I don't know how much that it's going to be. That's up to you. But here's the thing. It's a great way to meet your objectives. So if your objective is to plan a vacation annually, a big vacation, maybe like for 2 weeks, and you want a 2-week vacation to go to maybe, I don't know, Portugal, the UK, wherever, right? And also, and I'm going to ask you this question in a second, Jen, but it's a great way to meet that objective, because here's my brain's just churning, because once you start living with somebody and you start having division of money or bringing money into a responsible account, then my mind goes to, what about if there's an emergency? Do you have a specific account like with emergency funds?
Yeah, you can put it into, a money market. Typically, that's the most suggested type of account because it's very liquid, but it's not super as accessible as just going to the bank and taking it out. But the point is that you have a separate account for these emergencies. And it's such a great point that you're making. Always have the emergency fund outside of this responsible account, because here's the thing. Yeah, and going back to the other question about, the horrible, not the horrible boyfriend, but the boyfriend who's horrible with money. I mean,
There's
it
a
might be horrible.
conversation.
Yeah, it might be horrible. But going back to that too, if you're in that situation, it's super important to make sure that you have an emergency fund set aside, especially for rent, especially for those expenses. And here was the thing that, going back to that, if I would say kind of pretend, let's do a trial run. Let's like kind of do a trial run for real. If we know that, let's say we found a place and the rent is $1,500, let's just say, depending what state you're in, I know that number could be way off.
What state, what city? Oh yeah.
Just play with us.
Yeah.
So let's say it's 1,500. See if you can save your amount, see if you can put away that amount. So that just in case, let's say either one of you loses your job, especially COVID, you've seen it. So many people, they lost their income, their resources. So many people are trying to refinance. So many people don't know how they're going to pay for their apartment.
Right.
And this is a classic example of, like, if you do not have that money set aside for rent, and now let's say it's not COVID, but let's say it's the person, the partner that doesn't really do well with their money. They're horrible at managing it. What are you going to do if you lose your job or they lose their job? And now it's like, on top of not being responsible and being horrible with money, you have no income coming in. And this is why it's so important to see, can you even put aside, 3 months, 6 months worth of rent, anything? If you can't handle even that activity, that's another red flag, because it's showing like, okay, do you even have the wherewithal to do this? Do you have the habits? Are you willing to learn the habits to do this? Because if you don't, and you see that, that's another thing you need to pay attention to. It's like, okay, what if something happens? And sometimes it's not a matter of what if something happens, it's more of when it happens. Are we going to be positioned? Because you have to look at these things ahead of time. It's so stressful to be trying to figure things out in the moment. Okay, what are we going to do now? It's like, that's not the time. This is why Summer was saying in the beginning, you got to be proactive instead of being reactive. It's not a good place mentally and emotionally to be trying to figure out financial situations when you're under so much stress and pressure.
Absolutely. Because at that point, many times our coping mechanisms seem to be all over the place, so it's really, in everything we do, it's really important to plan as much as you can, or to be proactive as much as you can, right? Because that really helps with the coping through an emergent situation. So great tips. I love them all. Do you have any other ideas about this particular question? Because we're going to kind of wrap.
Ooh, I think to wrap it up, to tie this all together, you have to start learning how to communicate. And I know I get this a lot. You're like, well, when do I start this conversation? Well, it's kind of like sticky. I don't know how to bring this up, because I know psychologically, as a society, we've been taught not to talk about money, religion, and sex, and politics, and all kinds of things. Right. But we got to change that. If you're tired of the way things are going because it's not working, there's your big freaking clue. You have to start approaching things differently. And so you have to take that step and have this conversation, because then my question is to you, if you don't, then when are you going to do it? When there's a big cluster mess in front of you, you don't want to put yourself in that position. You want to know what's happening. You got to be ahead of the game and be prepared so that you're not stressed. So I think learning to communicate about this. I wrote a book called Do Before I Do. There's questions in there after every single chapter that kind of opens the dialogue. Awesome. There's lots of books about communication and money. I think if you're in this situation, the earlier, the better, especially if you're having this conversation, like, we want to buy a house, we want to move in together. You have to talk about money. Please do not rely on like, oh, we love each other. That's great. I'm not discrediting that. You want to see if you're emotionally compatible, but you also have got to be exploring if you are financially compatible as well.
Oh, beautifully said. Beautifully said. I'm going to touch on a couple of things that you had mentioned here. So you talked about, certain things being taboo and how we were raised, not to talk about money, not to talk about sex, not to talk about religion, not to talk about these things. However, when you are thinking about making such a major move or transition in your life with somebody else, your values and your beliefs come into play. And do they align with that somebody else you're planning your life with?
Mhm.
So important. I touch on this in my book because my book is all about beliefs and values, understanding those, because those are the foundation for how you construct and live your life. So with that said, you've touched on something beautiful here. Start talking about this. These are not taboo things. This is not to be, you're not supposed to be shy about these things. Talk about it, understand it, have that open dialogue. If you don't know how, then maybe you're not ready right now to move in with somebody or to share finances, because it's a major issue. And here's the thing. This is a life, love, and money show. It's going to filter and leak into several different areas of your life, financial issues, open dialogue, whether or not you have that communication. If you don't, that shuts things down right away, and you can't have those dialogues. It's difficult to have those conversations about life, about love, about money. So start now. Start now. If you don't know how, reach out to us, because we're also coaches and we want to help you. We want to help you through the process of, if you have questions regarding life, if you have questions regarding love, if you have questions regarding money, we want to be a support to you. This is what this show is all about. This is free 30 minutes worth of coaching. If you have questions, DM your questions to us on Facebook at the Life, Love, and Money with Summer and Jen page, or you can also, submit your life, love, and money questions. It says it right there. So submit those questions to Facebook, submit those questions to Twitter. We're also on YouTube, and we're also on at Core Women on Instagram. So with all that said, we want to thank you so much for joining us for the Life, Love, and Money Show with Summer and Jen. Woo! Thank you. This was such a great show. Thank you, Jen, for all of your great suggestions and your strategies. So this is a weekly show. Thank you so much. This is a weekly show. So join us back here. You can join us. We will be live at the same time next Thursday. So join us on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram or Twitter. So, and we go live on Instagram at 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, which is also 2 o'clock Eastern Time. So we hope to see you then. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jen, again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, guys.